Hi, Gerhard Bloom here, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So today I'd like to look at the greatest love of all, right? Learning to love yourself. Isn't that wonderful, right? Learning to love yourself. So we have this apotheosis of the ego where everybody thinks they're Puyi, the last emperor, right? This is absolutely disastrous. No, self-love is not the greatest love of all. You shouldn't love yourself. You should respect yourself. These are two very different things, right? Loving yourself leads to this cult of the self, narcissism, and narcissism is toxic, absolutely toxic. In the Black community, this has been absolutely ruinous, and I'll get to the white community later, right? But let's look at the Black community, right? So here are the comments of one single mother to Mayor John Lindsay in New York City on the subject of welfare, right? This is her. I've got 6 kids. Every one of them has a different daddy. It's my job to have kids. Your job, Mr. Mayor, to take care of them, right? Now, how is this one man, this mayor, going to take care of these 6 illegitimate kids? And they're illegitimate, right? Children can be illegitimate, means they're born to a single mother, right? That's illegitimacy, right? So how's this mayor going to look after these 6 kids, as well as the thousands of other kids being raised by single moms? Of course, this woman means the city needs to financially support them. But by the city, she means the public, like the tax-paying public, right? They're paying for her kids. And no, this woman has absolutely no shame, right? So the question arises, who's going to properly care for these 6 kids, right? A child being raised by a single parent is doubtlessly facing, tremendous obstacles, right? Raising a child with 2 parents is a difficult task. Now, the responsibility importantly includes investing time and attention to properly socialize the child. This woman hardly represents the best of circumstances, right? So, I can't help but wondering, what happened to the lives of these 6 children? 6 kids, each one has a different father, and undoubtedly these fathers have children with several different mothers. Where's the shame, right? No, I don't think low self-esteem is a problem here, right? So, she's under the misapprehension that she's being actually employed by the state to have illegitimate kids. And, we can understand reasons for her confusion because she actually was getting paid by the state to have kids, right? How did this arise? Well, this happened in the 1960s by social workers willfully encouraging this sort of thinking. In the Black community, there's no longer any shame in being a single mother on welfare. It has become normalized. Nor is there shame in living in lifelong welfare dependency. So how wonderful. No shame, right? Well, no, the absence of shame is a problem. It's a serious problem. And yes, I know the social justice warriors are conducting a current war on shame. It's become fascist to induce shame in anyone, and foolish and confused to feel it in yourself, right? You should love yourself, right? Remember, you're a victim, right? There's no shame in that, except, of course, the shame you should feel for your whiteness, right? A fact that you bear absolutely no responsibility for, right? You bear shame for those actions that you undertook or failed to undertake, right? So, shame is an evolved social emotion. It plays a vital role in regulating social behavior. The fear of shaming yourself or one's family is no doubt prevented more inconvenient births than any government-sponsored abstinence campaign. For most communities, welfare dependency is a source of deep shame. In the inner city, generational welfare dependency has become normalized. Thomas Sowell, the Black economist, speaks of the important contrast within the Black community of the respectable working poor and the disreputable poor. Right? This is in Thomas Sowell's work, The Quest for Cosmic Justice, right? The 2002 work. The respectable poor felt pride in their self-sufficiency, the dignity of their honest work. With the dawn of the social welfare state, many began to lose their sense of pride. Why were they working so hard when others were gaining so much for free? Right? Naturally, they came to feel themselves as social dupes. Effortlessly, they could avail themselves of generous government giveaways. So welfare under Lyndon Johnson's Great Rescue Package, the Great Society became more generous, easy to get on, easy to stay on, and simply put, you could make more money on welfare than you could at an entry-level job. Right? But those entry-level jobs are called entry-level for a reason. You start at the lowest rungs, you gain experience and competence, and you climb that ladder. In the 1950s, as Black and white wealth were both increasing, Black wealth was increasing faster than white wealth. This is the 1950s, before the civil rights movements and the achievements, which were wonderful. There were astonishing gains, and fantastic, right? So Blacks were narrowing the income gap. In the 1950s, the rate of intact families was slightly better than the white family, right? Slightly better. After Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program with these generous welfare giveaways, the Black family absolutely eroded. Over 70% of Black children are brought up in single-parent families. Absolutely toxic. No, you should not love yourself. You should respect yourself. We have a generation of narcissistic, entitled, spoiled brats. Parents tell their little Fabergé eggs, "Oh, you're wonderful just the way you are." No, you're not wonderful just the way you are. I believe we live in a moral universe. You have a part in playing and fulfilling your moral obligations and your duties, right? You are not wonderful the way you are. I fall short of the glory, and I am hardly alone in that. But I realize that there are duties and responsibilities I have to live up to. So that doesn't mean loving myself unconditionally. Your self-regard should be tightly correlated to your achievements and your successes. Right? This unconditional self-regard is utter nonsense. And contrary to what you may have imagined, this social justice idiocy didn't arise amongst the poor, the allegedly disenfranchised. No, this isn't a bottom-up phenomenon, a cry of rage from the oppressed. Although they cry, and rather a lot, it's all highly manufactured. This is where we get to whites, privileged whites, and quite a few privileged Blacks, actually. And yes, there are privileged Blacks. The strongest proponents of this narrative come from some of the most elite privileged universities in the world, right? From there, they colonize the media, the educational system, corporate offices. Heather McDonald is surely correct in pointing out that by any measure, that this activist generation is the most pampered generation the world has ever produced. It is also the most narcissistic, i.e. the most self-loving. And is this bad, right? Isn't self-love good? Oh, it's bad. Narcissists feel very little reluctance in lying or using power and manipulation to advance their goals, right? This is from Jan Twinge's book with Campbell, The Narcissist Generation, right? So does this remind you of anything? You know, the lying, the using power, the manipulation to advance ends? Oh yeah, this is the social justice movement, right? The narcissism epidemic, right? They discuss how today's youth has become the most entitled, self-absorbed generation ever, and the rates are accelerating. And this is data-driven, right? Data-driven. This is not armchair theorizing. This is empirical examination of the data. So in the narcissism epidemic, by 2006, 1 of 4 college students agreed with the majority of items on the standardized measure of narcissistic traits. And no, their conclusions weren't simply based on one study. Numerous studies involving comparing surveys of students of the same age from different decades demonstrates the steady rise in narcissism. In one study, the results of the questionnaire examining empathy and perspective taking were compared from students in 1979 with those from 2009. So nearly 14,000 students in each cohort had been tested. Scores for the 2009 students had fallen precipitously, right? This means a sharp decline in empathy and perspective taking, right? This is shallow narcissism, right? And where did this epidemic start? Leftists? Of course leftists. Of course leftists. Every toxic idea that you recently encounter is from radical leftist ideologies. It was leftist educators in the 1970s convinced that students, particularly girls, were suffering from an absolute crisis in self-esteem. This was misguided from the beginning. The results of the study that set the whole movement off indicated that white boys and white girls had self-esteems that were roughly the same, although white boys had a slight advantage. Yeah, but what about the black kids? Aren't they suffering low self-esteems, right? No. Black girls whose academic achievement was behind the white kids had higher self-esteems than the white boys, right? The black boys with the poorest academic achievement had the highest self-esteems, right? So, but the findings of this research were seriously misrepresented to the public by advocates certain of the virtue of their cause. You see, the advocates were searching for the root cause of everything from teenage pregnancy to low self-esteem. And every time you hear this quest for root causes, you know you're on the absolute search for nonsense, right? Root causes, right? So in the absence of evidence regarding this, they continued to push this nonsense, right? It seemed so intuitively correct, right? The contrast between social achievement of those groups and their subjective self-worth should suggest that their self-esteems were radically untethered to performance, right? So cultivating unearned self-esteem is damaging, right? And it isn't the route to improving social outcomes at all, right? Again, shame is an evolved social emotion. It lets you know that you let yourself down, your values, and your community down. Right? This loving embrace of yourself, notwithstanding any, misbehavior on your part, this is damaging. And this is my speculation. I think this rise, concurrently with this sharp rise of narcissism, self-love, is also this sharp rise of anxiety and depression. Why might that be? What could the relationship be? Well, let's puzzle this out for a minute. If your parents have raised you as their little perfect Fabergé egg and you walk around, lovingly embrace yourself and think you are perfect just the way you are, and you confront a world where your fragile ego is bumping into the fragile egos of other narcissists, this is going to cause some internal confusion in your mind, right? So this is why we need safe spaces, right? Because your misguided ideas and beliefs, they have to be sheltered from intellectual challenge, right? Because you're just too fragile to accept reasoned, open, and honest debate. No, people who speak against the lie of social justice, they need to be silenced and canceled because it's just too damaging, right? And this is also this whole nonsense of standpoint epistemology, or speaking as a woman of, or my lived truth. No, you don't have a lived truth. There is the truth, and there's your perspective on the truth, right? Absolute nonsense, right? So, we need to praise people for actually doing something well, like winning, right? Used to be, you got a trophy, getting a trophy was contingent upon you actually winning. Well, now you get one for just showing up, for trying hard. Well, losing can be a painful experience in anyone's life, right? But losing sends you important cues. It might tell you that the venture that you're pursuing isn't one for you, right? Maybe you won't be, an NBA basketball player, but you could be a great physicist. Or it might be the case you just aren't trying hard enough. And you won't know until you get in there and you work hard. But people patting you on the head, telling you're great just the way you are, is not going to help you achieve, right? So absolutely dangerous nonsense. So, we have to, confront this nonsense of self-love and unconditional worth. No. I believe in the Judeo-Christian message, right? Every human being has moral worth and dignity, right? That's unconditional. You get that for being human. But your self-esteem needs to be correlated to your achievements. And you loving yourself, notwithstanding your moral failings, is a route to absolute disaster. In the Black community, as we've seen, this war on shame where, there's no shame in having six kids with six different fathers. This doesn't cause shame? Of course it's shameful. And this happens in the white community too, right? So, notwithstanding colors, race, absolutely shameful. There are proven routes to success, and finishing school, getting married before you have kids, getting a job. This is a proven route to success. Why do I bring all this up? This self-love thing, I was absolutely shocked. I was listening to public intellectual podcast, whose opinions I respect. I follow his podcast, and he's from a conservative perspective, and he was parroting this. I don't know how it got into his head. I mean, this nonsense is in the cultural ether, and it's hard to kind of escape it. But when you take a reflective glance at this nonsense, you realize it's not only nonsense, it's dangerous nonsense. So, and I do talk about this narcissism epidemic and the problems it's creating in my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. Not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues are important. And look, I'm trying to fight this cancerous ideology. I hope you'll support the cause. Buy the book. Even if you don't read the damn thing, give it to a friend who will read it. It's an important message. It needs to get out. And this isn't to serve my shallow ego. No. The message in that book is important. So thank you very much for your time. Buy the book. Please drop a thumbs up, and I hope you subscribe. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Bye-bye.